Hi, we're out on the range today, so please bear with gunfire you hear in the background. Today we're talking about the use of cover in a home defense shooting. Now, there's a difference between concealment and cover. Concealment is protection from enemy view. Cover is protection from enemy fire. And on the topic of home defense shootings, we spend a lot of time concerning ourselves with the subject of over-penetration. We want a gun and ammunition that will do sufficient damage to the intended target, but if the projectile goes completely through, or if we miss, we don't want that projectile to penetrate a lot of interior walls, endangering people in adjacent rooms, or penetrate exterior walls, endangering people in the neighbor's house. But that brings up the other side of that, and that's a question that's come up quite a bit lately, which is, if you are in a home defense shooting and you're trading shots with an intruder, what are some things that are likely to be in your house that you could use as cover? How much bullet resistance is there to things like your interior walls, your furniture, your household appliances? Now, that's a good question. On the topic of interior walls, here in the United States, most interior walls are not insulated, and they have a frame of 2x4s on 16-inch center, and then a layer of sheetrock on each side. Sheetrock can vary in thickness, but it's usually for interior walls a ½ inch thick. If you shoot at an interior wall, you're going to be shooting at that 2x4 in such a way that the bullet will have to penetrate the 3½ inch aspect of it, and that can provide some bullet resistance. But when they're on a 16-inch center, your chances of hitting that 2x4 are about 1 in 10. Interior walls make extremely poor cover, and we've demonstrated that on several previous occasions, so we don't have to demonstrate it today. But I do want to demonstrate the bullet resistance of a couple of types of household appliances and some other things that might be in your house. Let's take a look. Now, what we have here is a very rudimentary bookshelf, the back of which is 3/8 inch thick particle board, and behind the bookshelf is you. Now, this has a glaring problem in using it as cover in that there's no books on the lower shelves. But presuming that your bookshelf is actually full of books and they're stacked the way books typically are, let's see how much bullet resistance we have. I'll go back 5 yards and I'll shoot this with my Beretta 92FS, which I have loaded with Remington green and white box 9x19 115 grain full metal jacket round nose. And remember, the way books are typically stacked, the bullet will be traveling with the pages, not against them. So let's see how well you fare hiding behind the bookshelf. Now, you saw our soda jugs fell over. That was just the concussion knocking them over. None of the bullets penetrated through the bookshelf. Here's one of the books that stopped a bullet. Let's take a close-up look at it. The bullet impacted here and penetrated through to there, so almost all the way through the book. So far, so good. Let's try something a little more powerful. I have the soda jug set up again, and this time I'll shoot with my Glock Model 31 in caliber .357 SIG, which I have loaded with Remington green and white box .357 SIG 125 grain full metal jacket flat nose. Let's see how this does from 5 yards. Really interesting results. I fired 5 rounds of .357 SIG. One penetrated enough to hit the particle board on the back of the bookshelf, but it did not penetrate, only made a dent in it. The others penetrated significantly less than the 9mm did, even though the .357 SIG is the same diameter projectile, a heavier projectile, and traveling at significantly greater velocity. In fact, the one round that did penetrate more only did so because it went through a hole that had been created by one of the 9mm projectiles, so it met with a lot less resistance. So why did the significantly more powerful .357 SIG penetrate less? This is due mainly to projectile deformation. Let me show you a close-up of a couple of the projectiles. The 9mm on your left was a round nose, the .357 SIG on your right was a flat nose, and even though that doesn't seem like it would make a lot of difference, in this case it led to a lot of bullet deformation and significantly less penetration. Well, I've got my soda jug set up again, and we'll try one more handgun. My Colt government model, caliber .45 ACP, which I have loaded with Remington green and white box .45 ACP 230 grain full metal jacket round nose. I'll shoot this from 5 yards, and we'll try not to shoot through any of the existing bullet holes. Now you saw that this time it did not knock any of the soda jugs over. I'd moved them back just a little bit so they weren't touching the back of the bookshelf, so if the bookshelf moved it wouldn't knock them over. And I saw that with the 45 I got about as much penetration as I did with the 9mm. Let me show you a close-up of a couple of these 45 projectiles. And there they are with almost no deformation at all. Okay, now let's try this Stevens double-barreled 12-gauge shotgun with cylinder bore barrels that I have loaded with Remington green and yellow box 12-gauge 2 3/4 inch double-aught buck 9 pellet. Let's see what this can do from 5 yards. And as expected, the buckshot tore up a couple of our books really badly, but actually had less penetration than the 9mm or the 45. So far, our books have been doing really well. I've traded out a bunch of them so they're not so shot up, and now we'll try our Colt AR-15A2 H-bar, which I have loaded with PMC X-Tac ammunition. That's 5.56 NATO with the green tip 62 grain steel core projectile. Let's see how this does from 5 yards. Well, again, interesting results. The books on this shelf are packed pretty tight, and I found that with the 9, the 357 SIG, and the 45, even if the bullet happened to go actually between two books, they were packed tightly enough that it stopped those projectiles. With the AR, I fired 6 rounds and only 2 went through, and the 2 that went through happened to slip between 2 books. So I've got some new soda jugs set up, and I'll try that drill from 5 yards again, and this time I'll make sure that I center the books I'm shooting at. Again, I fired 6 shots, only 1 made it through, and after going through the bookshelf, didn't have much power left. Now let's try one more rifle. This is a Wasser 1063, one of the many variants of an AK platform, and I've got it loaded with Wolf 7.62x39 123 grain full metal jacket spear point. So it would appear, as the man said, the AK-47, when you absolutely positively got to kill every in the room. Now there's one more point that this bookshelf can help us illustrate. Earlier I was talking about interior walls with 2x4 studs on a 16-inch center. Well, interior door frames, like the door into a bedroom, that frame will have 2 or 3 2x4s right there together as part of that frame. So if you were trying to hide behind that door frame and shoot through the doorway, how much cover would you get from 3 2x4s? Well, here's 3 thicknesses of 2x4 and you behind them. So I'll go back 5 yards and I'll shoot this with my Beretta 92FS, which is still loaded with 9x19 115 grain full metal jacket round nose, and we'll see how much cover 3 thicknesses of 2x4 provide. So 3 2x4s don't look like they're going to do you much good. So we'll replace you and try one more shot with a 9mm. And it looks like our results are confirmed. Now I want to take a moment to discuss household appliances. First, your refrigerator. Refrigerators are not very bullet resistant, and what bullet resistance they do have has a lot more to do with their contents than their construction. Secondly, the stove. Unfortunately, I don't have a stove here to shoot today, but one thing I do want to say is, don't hide your gun in the oven. Let me tell you an anecdote. A long time ago, there was someone who was a deputy sheriff, and he had been issued a Smith & Wesson Model 66 .357 Magnum revolver. It's a full-sized handgun. He didn't carry it in his off-duty time, so he liked to hide it in various places around his house, so when he was gone, if the house was burglarized, there'd be lower chance of his gun being stolen. One of his hiding places was in the oven. That worked fine until one day when he was gone, his girlfriend came over, decided she'd cook dinner. You know where this is going. She set the oven to preheat. The gun went off. I personally examined this gun, and as near as I could tell, at least 5 of the 6 rounds in it went off simultaneously. Burst the cylinder, destroyed the gun, but the one round that was lined up with the barrel, that shot the bullet out just as if you'd shot it. exited the stove, and hit the refrigerator in the compressor motor. So he destroyed his revolver, his refrigerator, and his stove in one shot. I also want to talk about a washer and dryer. Let's take a look. Now here's a washing machine, and on the other side is you. I've got the front off this washer, and you can see that there's machinery under the clothing receptacle, and that's probably going to have some fairly good bullet resistance. But the way most washers are put in houses, it's unlikely you're going to be prone behind the washing machine. So we've got our soda jug sitting on the cooler to lift them up just a little bit, and we'll shoot a little higher on the washer. And we'll start by shooting 5 yards with our 9mm. Okay, washer didn't fare too well against the 9mm. Let's see how it stands up versus the 12-gauge shotgun loaded with double-aught buck. And what we see is some really significant dents. So it stopped the buckshot, but just barely. So our washing machine stopped the buckshot, but the 9x19 went through. And there are those who claim that in a medium like this, 9x19 will penetrate more than a 5.56 NATO. Let's put that to the test. Now I'm loaded with Federal American Eagle XM193 ammunition, which is 5.56 NATO with a 55 grain full metal jacket spear point projectile. Let's see how this does from 5 yards. When I fired with the AR platform, I made sure that none of those rounds went through existing bullet holes. But with the 9mm, all 3 rounds went through. With the 5.56, only 2 of them did. And you can see from this elongated bullet hole right here that those rounds were tumbling when they came through. It was sideways when it exited the washing machine. So there are some situations in some mediums with some types of ammunition where rounds like a 9mm or a 45 can give you a little more penetration than a 5.56. But the bottom line here is the bullet still went through and did a lot more damage to our soda jug. So will a dryer perform any better or any worse than a washing machine? Let's find out. And we'll start with the 9mm, and again I'll shoot from 5 yards. Well, against the 9mm, it appears the answer is no. Let's see how the dryer holds up against our 12-gauge loaded with buckshot. Now you saw it knock over all those soda jugs. Actually, of the 9 pellets, only 1 went through. So I've got the soda jug set up again. We'll try one more shot. And on the dryer, just like the washer, we see a lot of dents. Now of our 18 pellets, only 1 went through, so it looks like our dryer can stop the buckshot pellets, but just barely. So now let's try the dryer and the washer. I've elevated the soda jug so that I can shoot above the existing shot holes, and let's see if the 2 of them together can stop a 9mm. So the washer and dryer together did stop some of the 9mm bullets, but not all of them. Now let's try it with our 5.56 NATO, again with our 55 grain spear point full metal jacket bullet. Now this time our 55 grain bullets didn't tumble, and all 4 rounds went through both machines. So it would appear that sometimes a 5.56 might penetrate a little less, and sometimes it'll penetrate a little more. So what about furniture? Well, here's a couch, and here's you. Now there's a couple of side notes. One, recently someone contacted me saying that he was a member of his church's security team, and he was asking about the bullet resistance of church pews. And I told him I might include that in today's presentation. Now, I'm not going to be able to. That's a complex enough subject. It's going to require a presentation all on its own. Secondly, there's a lot of different types of furniture out there, and I'm going to shoot this particular couch because I think it is representative of the types of furniture most people have, and because I got it for free. Now, this has only the most rudimentary basic wooden frame, and it's made mostly of fabric and some kind of foam rubbery cushioning. So I'll shoot this from behind, so it'll go through the back of the couch and through this cushion. And I'll start with my Browning, baby Browning, caliber 25 ACP, which I have loaded with Remington green and white box 25 ACP, 50 grain full metal jacket round nose. and we'll see how well the couch can protect you from this. So the couch performed very poorly. Now sometimes I'll say that this or that is better than nothing. Most household furniture is not any better than nothing. And that brings up the question about the fleece bullet stop, and yes, I've demonstrated this before. We've seen powerful handgun rounds like .45 ACP and .357 Magnum stopped by the first through fifth layer of fleece, but that's only after they've lost a lot of velocity by going through soda jugs or the meat target. By themselves, things like fabric and cushions and fleece have very little in the way of anti-ballistic properties. So what about a TV? A few things. First, I have tape on the screen in case it shatters. Also, I have it sitting on this tarp so I can pick up shattered pieces of glass. And if you wanted to shoot a TV like this, you may need a gun that can shoot back in time to about 1990. But I'll shoot this through the screen from 5 yards with a Beretta 92 FS, and we'll see how well this ancient television can protect you. Well, I fired 4 shots and only the last one went through because that last one went through the screen in a place where it had already been shattered. So it looks like, at least against a 9mm, for the first couple of rounds, your television screen might help you out. But what if we take the screen out of the equation and shoot through the side? Well, I'll replace you, then I'll shoot from 5 yards with a 9mm going through the side, and let's see how we do. Fired 4 shots and all 4 went through. And of course, if you tried to shoot a modern flat screen television from the side, your biggest problem would be its thinness would give you very little to hide behind. Now there's one more thing to add. You saw that except for the buckshot, all the ammunition I used today was Full Metal Jacket. And people will ask about hollow points. For a lot of the things I was shooting, hollow points wouldn't have made any difference. And remember, today's presentation is from the perspective that you're a homeowner looking for cover while defending yourself against an invader. And most criminals' ammunition choices are based on whatever they can pilfer or what they can buy inexpensively. Full Metal Jacket is a common choice for criminals. So with that, what's the takeaway from everything we saw today? The bookshelf performed pretty well, and remember the back of my bookshelf is 3/8" thick particle board. Recently we did a presentation with some MDF, medium density fiber board. If the back of your bookshelf was a couple of 1/2" thicknesses of MDF, and especially if you change the way you stack your books instead of the traditional way of seeing the spine, you stack them that way and then put one book behind them sideways, it could enhance the effectiveness of your bookshelf. So the bookshelf was pretty good. However, the washer and dryer didn't seem to do us a whole lot of good, and that's indicative of the results you'll see from a lot of household appliances. Washers, dryers, refrigerators, stoves usually just aren't very good cover. The couch could hardly be counted as cover at all. As I said earlier, it's debatable to even say that that was better than nothing. But by contrast, the television, at least shooting through the screen, did give you some cover for the first couple of shots. But what about the tactics of using various things as cover in a home defense situation? That's a topic for another time. So until then, don't try this at home on what you call a professional, and thanks for watching the Household Items as Cover video.